Hi, I'm Jeff Cohn of Brave Dialogue, and thank you very much for being with me today. I am delighted to have an old-time friend and someone that I've interviewed for many years and have watched him over the last several years since 2003 make his way up inside of the leadership in the state. I am delighted to have with me today State Representative Will Davis of the 30th District. Thank you very much for being with us today, State Rep.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Right.
Glad to see you.
I'm glad to be seen and during these times. So it's great to have you. I know that, we've haven't spoken in a while, but, I'm pretty excited about the House Bill 453 that you were the sponsor of. And when I saw the nature of the actual legislation and some of what you are trying to achieve, I really wanted to get you on the show and give you an opportunity to share with the viewing audience exactly what you're trying to achieve. And so I know that a lot of people know who you are in terms of your leadership, that you are the state representative for the 30th District, that you're the first the assistant majority leader, appropriations for the capital committee, for the elementary and secondary education, public safety, energy and environmental, international trade and commerce, labor and commerce, special issues subcommittee, and environmental justice subcommittee. You're pretty busy in Springfield. Did I miss any?
No. I appreciate you sharing that with those that are watching. Probably the most important function that I have, and that's twofold, is I chair the Appropriations Committee for K through 12 education. So I oversee the dissemination of about, right now, a little over 8 billion of your tax dollars that are disseminated to both elementary and high schools throughout the entire state of Illinois. A large portion of that budget is also early childhood education. And then there are several other lines that flow into that. And then more recently, I was just appointed by Speaker Welch to be a part of what we call the Budgeteers. So essentially, you just have a small group of legislators who are actually the negotiators for the overall state budget on behalf of the House Democrats. And so recently just appointed to that. So I'm in the thick of the conversation about the upcoming budget, how it's going to come together, how budgetary dollars will be implemented, disseminated. I'm right in the heart of that conversation on behalf of House Democrats. So I'm very, very honored to be in that position now. I appreciate Speaker Welch giving me the opportunity to do so. He felt that amongst all of our legislators, and everybody brings great skill sets to the table, because I've been in the House now for 20 years and have served on budget appropriations committees. He felt that I bring a vast and appropriate knowledge to the conversation. So I'm happy to be a part of the budget negotiating team on behalf of House Democrats now.
Well, I think he made a wise decision by selecting you, and because you've been serving us for over 20 years, actually. And I know that, is that something that's new, that the Budgeteers, is it, or something that's been there, a committee that's been there before, or is it something that it's new to his leadership?
Well, no. Budgeteers have always been there. At some point, you've got only a handful, or in some cases, even just one person from your caucus who was in the room negotiating with the other caucuses as well as the governor's office, the budget that we ultimately vote on and pass. And this year, for the past couple of years, we've been served by Majority Leader Greg Harris, who's from the north side of Chicago. This year, he announced that he would not run for re-election. So this is his last budget negotiating year. So again, just acknowledging that we need to have the right people in place moving forward. The speaker then asked me, along with a few other members, to round out the Budgeteers team. So we've always had what we call Budgeteers, or the budget negotiating team. So it's going to change a little bit. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Good. I just didn't know that, but this, the clarification is good. So we're here to talk about House Bill 453 that you sponsored. For those who don't know what it is, I'm going to read a little bit, section 18-50.2, vendor information reporting. Beginning in levy year 2022, each taxing district that has an aggregate property tax levy of more than 5 million for the applicable levy year shall make a good faith effort to collect and electronically publish data from all vendors and subcontractors doing business with the taxing district as to, one, whether the vendor or subcontractor is a minority-owned, woman-owned, or veteran-owned business as defined in the Business Enterprises for Minorities, Women, and Persons with Disabilities Act. And two, whether the vendor or subcontractor holds any certification for those categories, or if they are self-certifying. If the vendor self-certifies, then the taxing district shall publish whether the vendor qualifies as small business under the Federal Small Business Administration standards. That's the primary crux of the actual House bill. And I wanted to give you an opportunity just to share a little bit about your leadership on that, because I can just imagine that you've been working on this. It wasn't something that you just got done overnight. And if you did, I take my hat off to you even more. But I really want you to tell the story. How long have you been working on House Bill 453?
Probably the concept of House Bill 453 probably started somewhere in 2020. But it's not unique to us in Springfield. I have introduced and gotten passed and signed by various governors several pieces of legislation that are asking for information. So in as much as we want to increase supplier diversity, increase opportunities for women and minorities and state contracting across the board, we want to start with gathering appropriate information. So, and I'll say it this way, let's see how bad we're doing at it.
Okay.
And what we have been able to find out is that we're not doing very well at it. But it's the collection of data that at least gives us the thought that maybe we need to now start figuring out how to do it a little bit better. So we've taken that overall idea and we were trying to figure out how to translate it to local municipalities and local taxing bodies. So right. House Bill 453 is kind of the manifestation of saying, hey, share some information with us so we can see how you're doing with it. And then depending on how you're doing with it, now we can have a forward-moving conversation about what we can do to make it better. We know that municipalities are growing. Many of them are getting a lot better at bringing in developments into their jurisdictions. Even out here in the south suburbs, lately you've seen 3 Amazon facilities built, right. Markham, Matheson, University Park, Country Club Hills, their light industrial and intermodal section is growing by leaps and bounds. So you're starting to see communities expand their horizons a little bit. And all we're simply saying is that for any taxing body, if you've got that aggregate levy, start collecting some data on what that diversity looks like in your particular sector, not just your town, but we're asking school districts to do it. We're asking park districts to do it. We're asking libraries to do it. Whoever you are, start gathering some data. Now, to the extent in which we're trying to advocate for more diversity in your contracting, not just actual construction, but let's not forget professional services, which is engineering, architecture, attorneys, accountants. A lot of that stuff is electronic. So I don't have to be in downstate Illinois to get that contract. I'm just communicating with you using electronic means. And maybe I do have to go downstate Illinois once or twice. Just to have that face-to-face dialogue. That's not uncommon. So we're just saying, let's be very deliberate about how we're trying to help businesses across the state of Illinois, because many of the businesses we're talking about here many of them are small businesses.
Right.
We often talk about that we are trying to do everything we can to help small businesses. Well, let's not forget these small businesses in the grand scheme of things. Construction contractors, and some of these professional services contractors are small businesses. They may only have a few people working for them or very small shops, maybe right. 10, 20 people, if that many. So they're small businesses. So this is an effort to ultimately try to figure out how we can help small businesses grow and move forward. So we started it in 2020, we introduced it in 2021, and we were able to get it passed and signed by the governor, I think in the late summer of 2021.
Right. Excellent. So if I could just narrow in, I've heard you say a lot in terms of MBE opportunities, making sure participation. What is your overarching goal in advancing participation? If you just could just summarize that for the viewing audience, what would be your overarching, just pinpoint what's the goal? What's the end run of this? Because this is monitoring at this juncture in time. It doesn't have teeth. And we'll get to its best effort. So what is your goal in moving the monitoring needle forward?
I think the ultimate goal is to put in front of all of these taxing bodies that you've got all of these great small businesses here that you can do business with that happen to also be minority and women-owned businesses. Again, these are small businesses, and we want to do what we can to grow and proliferate small minority businesses.
Gotcha.
And even in the construction space, there are plenty of them, ready and willing. They're professional, they're certified, you know, they have all their I's dotted and T's crossed. They just need to be given the opportunity. And if we can present this to them, maybe they're willing to expand their horizons and give some of these businesses an opportunity to do work. And the unique thing about it is that a lot of these businesses, their offices are in those communities.
Right.
Their families go to the park districts and participate that way. So it's just almost another way of turning over tax dollars back into the community. But a lot of small businesses, they hire from the community. So if we're able to help them to sustain, they're going to give back to our communities many, many, many fold in so many different ways. So again, it's about growing small businesses, and they're going to return that effort back into those communities.
Got it. Recycling the tax dollar and growing small businesses. Very nice.
Right.
So,
and Jeff, real quick, the unique thing about some of these taxing bodies, and again, our bill says $5 million, their budgets are much more than that. When you talk about a park district, their budgets are going to be in the $20 and $30 million. Municipalities, of course, high. So we're not talking about, even though our threshold is only $5 million, these entities do have very large budgets, so they have the resources.
Okay. So please explain best effort. I mean, that was spelled out. It's not mandatory at this juncture in time. What's best effort, and why no teeth, if you will?
Well, we have to start somewhere. So a lot of people in Springfield shy away from mandatory things.
Yep.
Or in some cases, particularly as it relates to units of local government, if we say mandatory, they're going to say it's an unfunded mandate. You're not giving us any money to capture information, when all you really need to do is change a form. If you collect the information electronically, add another field to your website for that box to be checked, if you will. So it's not, to us, it's not over the top burdensome, but that's just a cry in Springfield when you say, oh, it's an unfunded mandate. So we have to try to figure out how to be sensitive. The idea is to get something passed, get it on the books, and get it moving forward. And then at some point, maybe we can talk about the mandatory aspect of it. And again, collecting data sometimes shows you how good you're doing, but in a lot of cases, it shows you actually how bad you're doing. And if we see that there's a lot of not collecting information, we see that there's not a lot of diversity being utilized, I think at least gives us the opportunity to make the argument, well, now let's make it mandatory, because we tried to work with you to say, hey, it's voluntary. Again, show your best effort. And sometimes there is no best effort, because sometimes people don't want to do it.
No, okay.
And so now we can come back and say, well, we tried to work with you, and nothing came of it. So now let's make it a little mandatory. In some cases, we even tried to tie it to, at least at the municipal level, one of the distributions that municipalities get from the state is motor fuel tax dollars.
Right.
We collect that and then redistribute it back to local municipalities. So we even suggested, well, maybe if you don't want to give us the information, then why do we need to give you these tax dollars? Now, of course, that's a serious point of contention, but I use it to illustrate, we asked you nicely, and why won't you just do it? Why won't you just put forth the effort? And again, this is something that's ultimately going to benefit those jurisdictions. Because again, if I'm a local contractor and my business is in town A, and I know what town A is doing, and I can come to town A and say, hey, let me get some of that work. I might hire a couple people from the community that are probably homeowners, or at least going to spend their money in that town. I'm a business located there, which means I'm going to continue to invest my tax dollars there as well. So there is actually a benefit across the board for doing it, because the reality is that if we really took a deep dive into some of the companies that many of these jurisdictions uses, particularly for those of us that are close to Indiana,
Right.
a lot of them are going to be Indiana companies.
Yep.
And those companies are taking our tax dollars and
Across
walking them right back across the border and spending them in Indiana. They're hiring people from Indiana who are going to come over here, make that money, and then when they get paid, they're going to go there, and that's where they're going to spend their money. So let's just be real about it as well. So here's a unique opportunity to help our communities grow and to thrive by encouraging participation from companies that are located in your towns. Their offices are in your town. Some of them have yards and buildings in your town.
Right.
So why not give them that opportunity to reinvest those monies back into their community?
I love it. I mean, you speaking, that's why I got excited when I read this. I found out I was introduced in a meeting that I was in encouraging school districts to participate in this. You know, so that's why I really wanted to have you on as a first guest to talk about this, since you were the sponsor. But who else, you know, which other colleagues got behind you on both sides? I mean, did you get, you know, partisan participation? You know, would you just share who helped you with this in terms of this particular piece of legislation?
Well, I'll say it this way. I'm trying to, as we're talking, look on my phone real quick just to see if I can find the debate itself. So when I passed the bill out of the House and then it had to go over to the Senate, I got 110 out of 118 members to vote for it.
Okay.
So which means that I got bipartisan support, Republicans, Democrats, you know, Black, white, Latino, everybody. Again, 110 out of 118 members supported the bill. So it had very broad support, because again, we're just asking for the collection of data. So many of us talk about the use of data to then improve situations.
Right.
This is no different. So give us the opportunity to ask them to try to collect the data. And again, we didn't make it onerous by saying you must do it, or you shall, as we say. We said, you know, put your best effort out there. But for me, best effort gives you the opportunity to try to do it on your own. And then it opens the door for me to come back at some point to say, I tried to let you do it and you didn't. So now we have to talk about how we can force the issue a little bit more as well. So it got broad bipartisan support. I'm sure there were a number of co-sponsors on the bill, if you will. My chief co-sponsors were Carol Ammons, Nick Smith, and Debbie Myers-Martin.
Okay, excellent. Good. And I'm glad to hear that it was bipartisan. So you've already talked about the behaviors that you want to impact in terms of at the local government level, you know, K-12, local colleges. Are of those groups and park districts, are there any that you would like to see, you know, the behaviors change a little bit more than the others at all? I'm not asking you to single any of them out, but we know that some of them have even bigger budgets than some of the others. So I just want to get your thoughts in terms of behavior impact as it relates to this monitoring piece of legislation at all.
Well, Jeff, thank you for that question. Dare I say, everybody does.
Okay.
I think all of the entities that you described are not doing this as well as they could do it. And ideally, what you want is for it to not be an afterthought, but you want it to be part of the initial discussion. So when South Suburban College, and I'll pick on them a little bit, who just got a capital grant to build a brand new state-of-the-art allied healthcare services building, I don't want to have to come to the president of the college and say, hey, don't forget, you know, supplier diversity when you're picking contractors to build your building. I want it to be part of their effort.
Okay.
On the front end of it. And that's for anybody. you know, because these entities, even though they don't do a lot of building all the time, but when they build something, it usually costs millions and millions of dollars. So why should I have to say something to you on the front end of it, say, hey, don't forget, you know, diversity, or what are your percentages for supplier diversity going to be, and not just a overall number. Like, can you break it down for me? You know, what is your goal going to be for Black contractors, women contractors, Latino, even veterans or gay, lesbian contractors, whatever categories you want to amalgamate? What is going to be that? I shouldn't have to ask that question. It should be a thought from the very beginning, no matter who you are as the leader of that institution, whether you are Black or white, it does, or Latino, it doesn't matter. It should always just be part of the conversation. So hopefully that's where we really want it to go. So it's just innate that we talk about diversity when we're doing these things, and not just your large scale building projects. If you're renovating something, the fight that I had with the hospitals is that the hospitals wanted to make their renovation so special. And I'm not saying there is not some specialty work when you're building and doing that work in hospitals. But if you're an engineer and you can read a blueprint, then you can figure it out, which means that I don't necessarily have to have some special certification in order to be able to do that work in a hospital. Because at the end of the day, it's paint, you know, it's drywall, it's ceiling tiles, it's electric conduit. There's not a lot that's really, really special when you're building hospitals. And that's the fight that I had with them about trying to demystify what it took to do hospital work. Right. And but they had set it up in such a way that if I was a Black contractor, I'd look at a hospital and be like, I don't do hospital work. Well, but I do plywood, I do you know, I do carpentry, you know, I do painting, you know, so what's electrical special about painting? Exactly. Right. So you have to demystify the efforts a little bit. So my goal, again, is that it become innate in us, that whenever we're doing projects, we're having a conversation about diversity on the front end of the project and not an afterthought on the back end of the project when there's really not much left to do.
Because when you really look at it, and I can see where you're going with this, each of the Amazon plants cost about $500 million to build.
Right.
Right.
And I can tell you that it was a struggle.
Prior to this, it would have been a proactive thought on spending $1 billion versus a reactive thought. And I think that that's where you're really going in this. And I can see that connectivity in terms of your thought path.
Right. And I can tell you with the Amazons, it was a struggle. It was truly a struggle. And I know you're going to interview a young man named Sean Harris. Right. At some point, you're teaching him. He should tell you about his challenges with Amazon and what it took for him to get a little bit of the Amazon work. But it's the challenge. But see, it shouldn't be that big a deal. You're spending that much money. There's plenty of money to go around. Right. Plenty of money to go.
So I like this because what gets monitored gets done. And so now you are putting a monitoring forward thought and thinking and integrating that into their behavior. That's what I see you doing. I want to start the behavior of monitoring data. That data comes in, somebody's going to be tracking that data, like you said, to show if we're doing a good job or if we're doing a bad job, and then taking the next step from there. So I really love that from that perspective, not to pound people at this juncture in time, but you'll have no problem pounding if you don't like the data. It's what I hear you say.
And Springfield is a place of relationships.
Right.
And everybody wants something. Not saying that's a bad thing. It's just the nature of the business. So if I keep asking you for something and you're not giving it to me, at some point you're going to ask me for something.
Right. So let me just ask you, going to 2025, I know that you're a visionary man. Legislation is about not only the now, but it's also about the future. So if I could go 3 years forward from now, and if I could have you sort of think, you know, to 2025, February 2025, the start of Black History Month in February of 2025, what has this legislation impacted? What do you see in terms of the impact?
Well, generally, and if I can glean something from Dr. King, again, being able to talk about these kinds of things on the front end of a project versus the tail end of a project would ultimately mean that we are judging people not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I'm a small business owner. I do this work. The fact that I happen to be African American really should not be a consequence as to whether I get the job or not. Judge me on based who I am as a company. Now we have to walk into this by pushing the diversity aspect of it. But ideally in 3 years, we should be colorblind in this space. We should be able to judge these businesses based on their track record, based on the work that they've done, based on references who can attest to the quality work that they do. That's where ultimately this should be in 3 years. And it really shouldn't be about acknowledging and having to intentionally acknowledge the diversity aspect of it. You hope that you'll be able to just see someone, despite what color they are, gender, all of those things, and just say, hey, they're a contractor, they do good work, they want to do this good work for us, and it shouldn't matter. So hopefully we'll evolve in 3 years that we won't have to looking at, again, the color of someone's skin or, looking at their characteristics, but just simply be judged by the work that they do, the quality work that they do. And that should create the opportunity for them moving forward. And part of this is for the local jurisdictions to also prioritize those businesses that are in their jurisdictions as well. Okay. If I'm in Hazel Crest and I got a contractor that's in Hazel Crest, why not offer a little bump on the point scale for this contractor in Hazel Crest that is here? They're registered in my town. Why should I not want them to get that? And if I create a scenario that offers them an extra point or two on their application, I don't see anything wrong with that. Okay. Don't see anything wrong with that at all. And we all have to look at it at every level that you just said, because everybody's got a jurisdiction. Within my jurisdiction as a park district, as a library, as a school, and even as a community college, if there are companies in my jurisdiction that want to be able to do this work, why should I not be willing to give them a unique opportunity to do it before I have to bring in someone from the northern suburbs to do the work, or from Indiana to do the work as well, wherever that may be. Right. So that's what I hope for.
Good. Well, you know what, State Representative Will Davis, I really appreciate you sharing this, your perspective, and really just want to compliment you on your leadership, because I just know around this conversation, we're watching what's taking place across this country right now as it relates to the diversity and equity and inclusion conversation, and it's trying to shift. So I know that it takes a great deal of courage to make people understand the significance of this. And so I'm just hoping that we can get this put in place so that Illinois can be a model state of how to actually make this happen proactively. And so I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with my viewing audience your excellent work that you've done. And I thank you. And I'll give you the last 30 seconds to close out with anything that you'd like to say to the audience.
Well, first of all, Jeff, let me say thank you for your interest in this issue and your willingness to have a broad discussion about it. I hope you talk to people about it and get a lot of different perspectives on this type of work that we're doing. But we think it's worthy, it's worth doing to try to give contractors and businesses of color, of diversity, women contractors, and a unique opportunity to do work all across the board. As a state legislator, yes, I want to make sure that we do it well at the state level, but also what I do also impacts local jurisdictions as well. And so we want to make sure that we're acknowledging that they are in communities, in these jurisdictions, and they should be given a unique opportunity to do so. Certainly thank my colleagues that think enough of these kinds of pieces of legislation to support them, to have voted for them and give them the opportunity to get to the governor's desk. And certainly those that have been signed by the governor, we appreciate that, but we know that there's still much more work to do, a lot of other sectors that we haven't tackled yet, and we're looking forward to doing it.
Thank you, Representative Davis. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being with us today. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation in many areas. And take a minute to read the legislation, become familiar with it, and call State Representative Will Davis if you have any questions. Thank you very much. I'm Jeff Cohn of Brave Dialogue.